I'm ill. I'm a natural born killer. You. All right, we are back once again. It is your boy here, Renegade Operative, and we're talking about a topical subject once again, a gaming discussion for the ages. And today we're talking about, do review scores affect your decision in buying a video game or not? Do reviews matter or do they don't matter to you? Let's go, let's get it. This is by Reno the Bouncer. Shout out to Reno the Bouncer. So let's get right into it immediately for this. Do reviews matter to me? I kind of gave a pseudo answer to this as I go into this video, and I said, as a Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League enjoyer and someone who thought that the 2009 Game of the Year was cheeks, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, I thought the Capcom was a lot more pertinent that year. They had a lot more gusto. They released DMC5, they released Resident Evil 2 Remake, and Monster Hunter World Iceborne, which is far more impressive to me than what From did that year. I think they deserved Game of the Year, no contest that year. But I was like, no, they don't matter. Fun discussion pieces, but at the end of the day, my enjoyment buckles down to what I want as an individual for a game. Another person's opinion on what I may disagree with doesn't really affect me on a review process when it comes to wanting a game. Now let me elaborate. Let me explain myself here. Fun discussion pieces. It is fun to discuss a review whether you agree or disagree with it. I think we all have that sort of contention with counterpoints and discourse and things flown back and forth in reviews, whether it could be solid critical information or misinformation. There's nothing wrong with talking about a score and saying our personal feelings on it, because at the end of the day, it's just us talking about opinions on review scores, right? Everyone has done it, from critic reviews to the overall audience reviews. It's just something that comes up in light of conversation, and reviews mattering to other people. I can see them falling to stuff like FOMO, or maybe it's a fear of missing out, and maybe I'm not really that interested in said product, so maybe my mind is just sort of leaning into it a little bit and seeing if I might like it. I might go on a weekend, I might try that game or whatever. That tends to happen sometimes with reviews. I won't lie that reviews can get people hype, excited, and make them sort of wonder and get more curious about the product if it is a high review. At the same time, the reason I'm saying reviews don't matter to me is because I'm literally telling you that a game like Suicide Squad, which got lambasted across the entire board, torn apart, torn asunder, stomped into the finest wine, that game got like a average of about a 6 or a 5. I liked Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed Kill the Justice League for what it was, and it didn't really matter what people were saying about it or how people were tearing it apart. It was just overall how I felt on the final game when it came out, and I played it and I'm like, you know, this is not really that bad. This is not really the worst thing in the world to me, right? You know, it's pretty fine for what it is. It's a pretty fine game, and I think there is that nuanced middle ground sometimes where people are like, you know, I just pick up something for fun. I'm not expecting it to be a high tier masterpiece, and that's something we'll get into a little bit later, because I have some gripes with how scores are perceived amongst the general public. Even though the reviews don't matter to me, the way that people review games is annoying. Like, it's the most annoying thing in the world, because their metrics don't really make a lick of fucking sense, and that's gonna be like the last portion that I end off of. You know, there's no validity in some of the stuff that people sort of say in terms of a numbered metric, and I'm gonna explain why. I don't like how people review games nowadays in terms of trying to find a measure. Like, there's no middleman, there's no middle ground, and I don't think that's 100% necessarily fair when making a review. They don't matter, but I don't think something like that is really fair. I'll talk about that later. Be sure to stop at this point, and then when I get to the end of the video, I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. But you know, it's another person's review. It doesn't really affect my personal enjoyment. Sure, they could be saying misinformation, they could be saying stuff I disagree with, but overall, I base the interest of a game based on what I want, what I need, what I'm looking for. Am I interested in the brand? Of course, if they have something like a Last of Us or whatever, I'm a fan of that game. I'm gonna buy those. If they have something like a Resident Evil or a Dead Space, I'm gonna check it out. Sure, the reviews don't matter. Then I sit down and I play it and I formulate what is on my mind. I formulate my thoughts. What did I like about the game? What didn't I like about the game? And then I start to coax that into my review. What people tend to do nowadays is they see a review and they're like, and I understand this logic, they're like, well, I can't really buy this game if it's under a certain number because it's $70. I'm very frugal with my money. I only trust trusted reviewers. I don't trust the critics, or I don't trust the fans. I only trust what certain people in my group or ilk say about the game. And I call that, you know, a spread of word of mouth. I thought that was totally fine for what it was. When I used to listen to word of mouth, I still sort of get opinions back and forth between what's going on with individuals, either in my Discord or something like that. And this happened with Alone in the Dark. Alone in the Dark got like torn apart by the critics, but a lot of gamers and a lot of people that played it that like old school horror, they seem to like the game. So I was like, you know what, whenever I get around to it, I'm gonna formulate my own thoughts. And I think that's just a stronger sort of perspective when you can sit down, you can be valid in what you're talking about, whether it comes to playing a franchise or playing an individual game, and saying, look, I know this thing from the ins and outs. I know it. I know exactly what I like and dislike after the span of a few hours. Reviews don't matter because they don't sway my overall final verdict. Otherwise, I had games where it was a high tier review, Time Splitters 2, and I had the initial impression of hating that game, but I sat down, I gave it more time, and I ended up loving it. So there are those moments where sometimes I might not like it initially, I'll come back to it later, or there might be times where it's like it needs more time to breathe and sink in, as well as other times where I'm like, I'm dead set solid on my opinion. I believe that, personally speaking, Capcom was the marquee game studio in 2019. And I firmly believe that. I still have those ideals to this day, and it's been years later, and nothing has changed my mind on that because they made a lot of quality games that I enjoyed that year. So I can go against the grain for high tier reviews like Breath of the Wild. I remember thinking that game was like so overrated, and then I can like games that people have torn apart like Horizon Zero Dawn. I seen people just completely shit on that game and I overall made a video on this channel saying I preferred Horizon over Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I still do to this day. I preferred Horizon over Zelda, and it's nothing that can change my mind on it. So I think it's fun to go against the grain, but I also think, you know, there are those times where I do sit there and I align and I see a game as a masterpiece for what it is, or I enjoy a game like people have in the past, like Nightmare Creatures. I played that and I'm like, you know what, this is pretty fun. This is cool, and this is my first time playing it. So it really gets your euphoria going when you can finally sit down, think for yourself, and see what is valid in your own playstyle and experience, and sharing that once you finally have your opinion all set out. Reviews don't matter, numbers don't sway me, it's whatever. But I don't like the way that people write and coordinate reviews these days, because I find them to be nonsensical. And this is the final part of the video. You know, and I don't have a problem with people looking into reviews in terms of a measuring stick, as long as it's like something where it's like, you know, that's another person's opinion, it's not really yours. Like, understand though, you're not taking the risk in buying that game because you want to wait for a sale or whatever. I feel like a gamer has many options before choosing what to do with their money. Whether it's you want to go balls deep, pull the fucking trigger, buy it day one, or you want to wait a little bit and see what your favorites are saying, what they're talking about before buying the game or wait for a sale. It's plenty of other games out there that you're going to play that you have a full palette, like your fucking backlog is super diverse and rich, and you're gonna be like, okay, am I gonna add something else that will take up my time, or is something going to be a waste of time, in my opinion? You know, you have to factor in a lot of features there. And the reason I don't like the modern review scale these days is because it doesn't make any sense. So when Alone in the Dark came out, and it was getting like 7s, 6s, I think it's mostly like 7s right now, people like to, and I said this before, there's no middleman, there's no nuance in between. A game just can't be okay. What people expect, especially those people in the spectrum of liking AAA games and liking AAA content and expecting this to happen when it's kind of rare, they want wall-to-wall 10 out of 10s, AAA bangers that are all like peak. And I understand having that logic, but there's gonna be the moment where a game becomes a 9 in your mind, or becomes a 7, or something along those ranges. And what people like to do is anything that is a 7 or below is trash. Like, they say this shit sucks, it's terrible, it's the worst game ever. A 7 out of 10, which is honestly not the same as we review games in the 90s or early 2000s, where it was a more fair metric. So you have it right here where it's like a 1, a 2. I can understand those games being like, you know, pure garbage or unplayable. Then a 3, bad, you know, then a 4, a 5. The shit still sucks after a 5, which is like quite honestly average. Then a 6 starts to get good here. You see what I'm saying? You see the top right here starts to get good. Then people will say, oh, a 7 out of 10 is trash. In what planet? Are you from the Moon Raiders? Like, what the fuck is going on there? Like, dude, it's like you start to get to that point, and it's like a 7 is trash, dude. I love Resident Evil 3 Remake in terms of like just its overall gameplay. I understand its problems. It's not a perfect game. No one is saying that. But to say that game is like not a 7 or a 6 in terms of pure fundamentals alone and how it functions and everything, it's weird. Not even a 5, like it's somewhere wavering around a 5, a 6, or a 7. And I know for some people that might be a little bit generous on the high side, but for people to say that Resident Evil 3 Remake was the worst Resident Evil game of all time when Resident Evil 0 is sitting right over there. No, I'm kidding. The worst RE game I ever played was probably Umbrella Corps, if you count that. What a soulless piece of shit that game is. For people to say Remake 3 was worse than Umbrella Corps, no way on earth. That is by far that game right there. Umbrella Corps is the worst RE experience I think I ever had in my life, and I would rather have a frog crawling outside of my urethra than to play that game ever fucking again. If there is some merit, I feel like some people are kind of scared, or they're kind of like in this whole mindset of being so negative, even though it is their opinion, being so negative that they don't want to say any good things about it whatsoever, even if those things do exist. And then you get to an 8 and it's like an average game. I never understood the whole facet of people calling an 8 out of 10 mid. But again, they don't matter. It's like none of their stupid shit matters. I'm just once again regurgitating this logic and how it doesn't make sense. Then a 9 gets good. Then anything in between, you know, you have your game of the year, stuff like that. You don't get wall to wall 10 out of 10s. And I said this before, like a 10 out of 10 to me is not a perfect game. That's another misconception across the board. When I have a game that's like a 10 out of 10, or I rate a game that's a 10 out of 10, that simply means that the game has like maybe 1, 2, or 3 flaws that is very, very, very minor in the grand scheme. It is possible game of the year. It is incredible, outstanding, all that good shit. But that is the definition of a 10 out of 10. And I more align with this review scale right here, where it's like a 1, it sucks, 2 or 3 is bad, 3 or 4 mediocre, you know, mid, then you have your 5 to 6, you know, average, all this stuff right here. 6 to 7 is good. And then you have in between this, because you know some people like to put like decibel scores, which sometimes I do it. I don't know why. I think I just do it to be cool. I just really do it to be cool. So 7, you know, really good. And then you have your going to 8, great, amazing. You know, then your 9 is outstanding, and then your 10 is incredible. And then between the 8 and the 10 is possible game of the year contenders, which I agree with. Like, even though I believe that a lot of award shows, they will only gun for like 9s or 10s in terms of a banner year, and your 8s, your amazing games, that's not really upper echelon, but they stood out enough to be amazing titles. Sometimes they get thrown to the wayside if there's too many 8s, but there's like way more 9s, you know what I mean? Like, it's so weird, but they still get nominated for game of the year contenders if nominated. So I still will see some of the greats going around, like your fucking Ghost of Tsushima was like, I do think it's overrated, but I do think it deserves like an 8 for what it is. But there are aspects where it's like, I don't believe it's a 10 out of 10 at all. But that's one of those games that got like nominated. That was an 8 that I could remember. And I think Spider-Man 1 is also a game that's a general 8 or 9. And that's also something that's like, it's been nominated. Was it nominated for game of the year contender? I don't remember. I did 2018 or whatever. That's a fucking blur to me. But yeah, I personally think that, again, we need to go back to the older metrics. We need to make stuff more simpler. I think people need to understand what is actually mid versus saying a 7 out of 10 sucks. And once we get back to normality with how things are measured, I think there are folks that will be taken a little bit more seriously. But until then, I don't think they will, honestly. And this metric will still be getting proven with how people wager and review their games, which is another reason why I don't take many user reviews seriously at all. I think one more thing we need to also take into account, and I've alluded to it here, is there are people that will make reviews that are not well articulated or not well thought out, and it just ultimately ends up being quite a bad review, missing points and subjects that are pertinent within the gameplay itself. As I smash my keyboard into oblivion. I'm sorry about that. I just like pressed my knee against it a little bit. But yeah, if you heard that loud bang, I apologize. But yeah, there are people that will make reviews that seem and sound like they're completely invalid, and I don't listen to them even further. This is when I take my own review and perspective into equation. What am I going to talk about in particular? You know, there are those people out there that will drone on about the most mundane, insecure things and things that are not really relevant or pertinent to the actual game. There will be gooners out there that will say if the game doesn't have enough tits and ass, then it's a 0 out of 10. And I don't factor that as an actual game review, in my opinion. I go out there and I'm like, okay, what makes the game a reality? What makes the story immersive or not? What makes the gameplay engaging or not? What makes the graphics engaging or not? It's not a narrow-minded one-track focus on the review. It's like taking a multi-layer facet of everything pertaining to the controls, the graphics, the gameplay, and everything, and just talking about how I feel. There is a difference between a good review and a shallow review, and they will exist out there for the people that really do care about them. But for me, I'm off that wagon. I gotta use my mind first, my experience first, and see what happens after I've engaged with the entire franchise or the individual product itself, and then I'll tell you all about it. I'll also add this one tiny nugget at the end of the video, which is quite funny, and it shows another reason why I believe that the reviews don't matter when a game of personal interest crops up. And since the 7 out of 10s are seen as like terrible games, this post describes something that's very interesting. These are great and successful games with Metacritic scores below 80. Days Gone, which I thought Days Gone was is the definition of okay, but I've seen bugs, I've seen triangles jut out of people's like ass, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? So I definitely saw that complaint, and I definitely agree with it in terms of all the patches and shit with that game, and how I died to a door from a game bug. I could see Days Gone being like, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I can see why people ripped into it. I didn't play Detroit Become Human. I'm not really a fan of Nier, but hey, it started off a successful IP, so there's nothing I can say that can really change that. Resident Evil 3 Remake is very, very overhated in my personal opinion, because for what's there as a game, it is a fun game to play. The main problem though, that I agree with other people, it could have realized its potential if it stick to a lot of quality aspects and content that was done in the original. If they had that original content like live selection, bringing back stuff from the original, expanding areas that got cut, it would have been a more grander game. But I do believe without those elements, it's not like masterpiece level or anything like that. It is a fun experience though. No alcohol required. I never played Lost Odyssey. Evil Within 1 and 2, shocking. Evil Within 1 and 2, shocking. 7s, like both across the board. 75 and a 76. I do love the second game a lot more than the first game for Evil Within. I think that's like a lot better. I would raise that to like an 8 in my personal opinion, but still. Then there's Mirror's Edge, which I played a little bit of the first one and I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine for what it was. No Man's Sky I never played, but I remember roasting it because the game launched like in a state that was unfavorable to a lot of people, so I remember doing that. Alien Isolation I have on Steam. I will get to that when I get a chance. And we scroll down the list even more. Dino Crisis 74. Dino Crisis is a fucking gem. I don't care what people say about it. That game is up there with like an 8 or 9 in my opinion. I don't give a shit. Legend of Dragoon Fire. I played that game like via a demo, and I went out and I bought it, and I just, oh man, I loved everything about the mechanics. It felt like so robust and quick, and man, that was amazing. Let's see, Pokemon Coliseum, never played. Arc the Lad, Twilight of the Spirits, never played it. Grandia 2, fire. I can't wait until that collection comes out for like the PS4 and Xbox. Ooh, I like Grandia 2 and 1, and we're getting that experience yet again, and they could port those games like until I turn into an old man. I'm still gonna be playing them no matter what. Custom Robo, never touched. Mega Man Legends gets a 59. A 59, and Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the rescue. Those games I have played. I'm a big Mega Man Legends freak. I think a lot of people don't really know it though, because I had a playthrough up on the channel and I never finished it. But Toy Story 2 is also one of those titles I touched via a demo, and I remember also loving that. So some of these scores, like someone said, some of these scores are a little bit criminal. Arkham Origins as well, like that's an underrated gem also in my opinion. So it's just all differences like here or there. I'm pretty sure like I said, Evil Within 1 it's a little bit janky sometimes, and the one-hit boss battles just fucking piss me off. Like it just pissed me off sometimes, but it wasn't the worst game in the world, honestly. Yeah, so if people are saying these 70s are trash, like some of these games as a first start had their merits. I think Killzone 1 is awful. Killzone 1 is not that good. I'm sorry. I do like Killzone, but I really did not like the first one whatsoever. I would get that like a 5, a solid 5 on a good day. Like just the precision aiming, the mechanics are broken. It's just overall dull game in terms of like open world design. Halo killer, you are not. Killzone 1, Halo killer, you are not. Let's go down the list here. Anything else that anyone else? I never played Sea of Thieves. I like Knack 2. Knack 2 was cool. Like it was cool. If Knack 2 got like was on this list or whatever in terms of like low scores, I don't know. I don't know though. I don't know the score of it, but I did like Knack 2. I didn't play Knack 1, and the Order 1886 was heat. Honestly, that's another game where it's like reviews don't matter. I don't care, because fucking the Order 1886 was fire. I wish they made a sequel to that game. Shit. But this is all stemming from the fact that Rise of the Ronin got like a 77 as well as Alone in the Dark. It got like below that a 60. I think it was a 66, I forget, but yeah, within those ranges. So it was a lot of people saying, oh, 7 6s are trash, and it basically prompted this whole discussion. And there are some games that people listed that got like a 59. Mega Man Legends getting a 59 is criminal. That's why I don't listen to reviewers or shit like IGN. I already said IGN can suck the biggest part of my pimp laden chocolate cock. Fuck IGN. That's how I'm gonna close this video. Fuck IGN. I will see you people next time. Hopefully you guys had like entertainment listening to me talk about how reviews don't matter, how the review scale these days is so weird, and signifying those games that got like 7s or 6s or even lower than that scores where I don't personally agree with, and I think they deserved better or higher. I hope this video gave some insight in how having your own mindset on these things can go way different amongst the curve. I will see you guys next time. Later.